I'm Jessie, and today we are going to talk about one of my all-time favorite fantasy book tropes, and that is the magical competition. I am a sucker for a competition, a contest, anything along those lines, and I'm like, I'll try it, I'll read it, and most of the time I'll like it. So I have a pretty decent-sized stack of books that we're going to talk about that all have some variation of this magical competition, right? Either contest to the death or, things along those lines. And I'm just a sucker for it, right? So if you like books with magical competitions, then definitely check any of these out because they are so much fun. I mean, we can't talk about competition books without talking about the Hunger Games, can we? Like, I feel like this is one of the ones that got me into it. Like, I had never really read many that had competitions until I read this. Granted, I read this pretty young, so the only other thing I could think of would be like Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, and that's, the fourth book in a series when the competition aspect comes in. So honestly, that doesn't really count, but it does have magical competition, and that is one of my favorite books in the series. So, except for the movie, because Harry, did you put your name in the Goblet of Fire? Like, we all know that, but, that is my favorite of the books, probably. But the Hunger Games, I mean, do I even have to explain it? We all know what it is. We've seen the movies, we've read the books, like, we have basically poor people living all across in different sectors, and their children are picked every year to battle to the death on national television for the entertainment of the elite. And that is really messed up. I know this is allegedly really similar to Battle Royale, which I have, but it's not going to be in this video because I have not read it. But that also has a competition. Now, this isn't like magical. This is more dystopian. It's not really a fantasy, but like it still fits the vibes. And this is kind of the one that it started me on this path. So I had to give it a shout out. Next, we have a book that I read recently. I read The Arc of, and it was actually pitched as Magical Hunger Games. And that is All of Us Villains. This was surprisingly good. We are following a bunch of kind of morally gray teenagers in this town where they have to participate in this contest generationally. And, each family of these like elite families has to choose a champion. These champions, literal teenagers, have to go into this like magical dome and fight to the death. And whoever wins, their family will get like control of the magic for that generation. It used to be done super secretively, but recently a tell-all book came out and no one knows who wrote it. And now there are like paparazzi and all kinds of people like stalking this town and waiting for this contest to begin. And when the contest finally begins, we have, these kids and we're getting all of their point of views. And some of them want to be there, some of them don't want to be there. And all of them just, none of them really want to kill each other, but they know they have to. And then we have one character that's kind of trying to bring it down from the inside and break this curse. Because basically, if there is not just one person standing, then everybody dies that's in it. So, like, it is a curse on this town. And I am super hyped for the next book. I believe this is going to be a duology. But book one, the way it ended, I was shocked. I was like, no freaking way. But I really like it. There's a very slight romance, and it's kind of enemies to lovers. But it's definitely not romance heavy because, like, you're not really having some romantic relationships in a game where you're supposed to be killing each other. But things change in this, and it's very different from the rest of the competitions that they've had over the years. And these kids kind of have to work together and kill each other and try not to kill each other. And it is so good. I definitely recommend this one. Next, we have one of my favorite books, and that is Fireborn by Rosario Munda. This is like a gender-swapped Anastasia-esque retelling where we follow this boy named Lee, and he was saved when his entire family, who was the ruling family, was slaughtered, and he was like sent to an orphanage and no one knows that, you know, who he is, and he like keeps this secret. And he grew up with this girl named Annie, who is like a poor peasant girl whose family was murdered by his family. And they kind of grew up like as best friends and everything in this orphanage. And now they are in this like elite training school for dragon riders. So they are dragon riders, and there is a dragon riding competition in this book. And there's so much more than that. It's super political. I actually have a full spoiler-free review for this one. I also did an interview with the author over on Elliot Brooks' channel last year. So much fun. Book 3, the final book in the series, is coming out this year. So now is your time to pick this one up. And Flamefall. Flamefall is the second book. It does not have a magical competition, but this one does. This one has a dragon riding competition to see who is going to be like the leader of the dragon riders, basically. And I'm so here for it. Next up, we have Erase the Sands by Sarah Beth Durst. This is an adult fantasy standalone, and we are following a mom who is just trying to provide for her daughter. Like, she was a like monster trainer, and these monsters called Keyhawks are basically the reincarnated souls of like terrible people, right? And basically it's like the worst thing that can happen is to be reincarnated after death as a Keyhawk, because once you die as a Keyhawk, you can never be reincarnated as anything else. And she basically trains riders to ride these terrible beasts that want to kill everybody and ride in these races. And we follow her and this other girl who has like run away from her family, and you know, she takes her in kind of like as a surrogate mother and trains her to ride these Keyhawks and win this race, because the race will change both of their lives if they win. But then there's also an underlying rebellion, and somebody murdered the emperor and nobody knows who that was. And we're trying to figure out this like murder, as well as this rebellion, as well as these like political uprisings, all while we're trying to win this monster race. It is fantastic, and I highly recommend this one. Sarah Beth Durst doesn't get enough love on here. Again, this is an author that I did an interview with my friend Sophia from Sophia's Thoughts, and we did half on her channel, half on my channel, so go check those out too. I will link them for you. Next up, we have The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I love this book. This isn't going to be for everyone. It is kind of a slower, whimsical, fairy tale-esque kind of you don't really know what's going on book. And that's just how Erin Morgenstern writes, I think. But I absolutely love it. We are following these two characters, literally a boy and a girl. I forget their names, from the time they are small children up until they're adults. And there's this like lifelong competition between the two of them. And all they know is they have a person that they're supposed to compete against. They don't know anything else. Like, this is just what they were set up to do. And we are following them as they work in this night circus that pops up overnight. It's this real magical place, and I absolutely love it. And the competition in this is kind of minuscule, but it's super important, and it's a thread that runs throughout the entire book, because basically they kind of find out who each other is, and they are competing with each other, but then they figure out like that they're not doing it right, and it is so good. So recommend picking this one up if you haven't, if it sounds interesting to you, if you like more like whimsical kind of books that you really just don't think too hard about, because if you think too hard, you're gonna like break your brain, because this is so whimsical. So definitely, I love this one. I love it. Then we have An Unkindness of Magicians by Kat Howard. Now, this is currently a fantasy standalone, but there's supposed to be a second book coming out. Is it needed? Not really. It ends like a perfect standalone. So I'm curious to see what the second book is going to be and when it's going to come out, but it definitely is something I'm going to read, but I don't think it's like super necessary. But I loved this book. We are following Sydney, who just kind of pops up out of nowhere and auditions to become the champion for a noble house, because again, kind of like in All of Us Villains, there's this like kind of generational competition between magicians, and the winner is the person that controls all the magic. Like the house that's the ruling house basically. And it doesn't start out as like fighting to the death, and then like it progresses to dueling to the death. So it starts out like kind of like, oh, we're just knocking out competitors and they like lose challenges, but as it progresses, like the stakes get higher. And we also in this book have a kind of like a murder mystery wove within it, and I loved it. It was a lot of fun, and if you like urban fantasy and magic and cost of magic, because I love that this book explores magic coming at a cost and what happens when you try to evade the cost of magic. Whenever you try to put off your cost onto someone else, or you try to avoid paying the toll. And I really, really like that part of this book, and yeah, I highly recommend this one. I have a full review for it, but oh my gosh, it was one of my first ever videos, so it's so awkward, but I'll link it if you want to check it out. Obviously, we have a lot of these books, and whew, we're getting through them. Next up is The Prison Healer. I read this book last year when it came out and fell in love with it. I picked up book 2, but I have not read it yet. But in this book, we are following this girl who is a healer in a death prison. So she basically does like the intake of all prisoners and checks them over, makes sure there's okay, and sends them on their way. She doesn't want to make friends. She has been there forever, like 10 years, I think, at this point. And she just wants to survive, right? Until a rebel queen is admitted, and she is literally on her deathbed. She is brought into the prison almost dead. And she gets this warning out of kind of this mysterious warning about keeping the queen alive until they can come rescue her. So she does it, and she ends up partaking in this challenge that the queen is supposed to partake in, but the queen is not strong enough. She's comatose. So she has to take part in these like magical trials to test to see if she should be released or killed. So whoo, it was so good. And the end of this book was like, the twist had me wanting to pick up book 2 right away. And I still haven't picked up book 2. But you know how that goes. All right, then we have Red Rising by Pierce Brown. This is a very well-known one, and I still need to read the rest of the series, but I read the first one last year, and I really did enjoy it. Was it a favorite? No, but I did enjoy it, and I liked the competition aspect. We are following Darrow, and when his wife is killed for no apparent real good reason, he ends up undergoing this transformation where he becomes what they call a gold, which is like one of the higher levels of society. And you know, he is a red, and it is gruesome. Like they have to like change his whole body and appearance, right? And then he goes undercover in gold society and has to enter this school, and he's trying to basically take them down from the inside. And he ends up entering this competition within the school where they're basically dropped in teams and have to like feign a war or something along those lines. It gets bloody and violent and gruesome, and I enjoyed that aspect of it. It was very Hunger Games in space. If I'm being honest, it gave me a lot of Hunger Games in space with a male main character. And I thought it was fun, and I can't wait to read the rest of them. Alright, the final magical competition book that we are going to talk about today is Where Dreams Descend by Janelle Angelis. This is amazing. I loved this book. And it is beautiful, for one. It's the Alcrate edition. But we're following our main character, Kalia, as she escapes this house that she's kind of been held at for her whole life, and she runs away to this big city and enters this magician's competition. Now, women are not seen as magicians. While they're not like banned from having magic, they are not stage performers. So she is the only female in this competition, and she is just blowing them all away. She is just gonna, she knows, right? She knows she's the bad bitch. And then we also have DeMarco, who is one of the judges who, you know, may be the love interest, and I love him. I love DeMarco. He is probably my favorite character in this book. But she is competing against other stage magicians in order to basically prove herself. And there's a lot that happens after that, but we also have a circus. There's also a performing circus in this book, so it fits my love of circus books. But the magical competition part of this book is super important. It's pretty much throughout the entire book, and I love it so much. It gives me a lot of Greatest Showman vibes with like the Zendaya and Zac Efron-esque characters. I know everyone else compares it to like Phantom of the Opera meets Moulin Rouge, and I can see that, but for me, it gives me, yes, Moulin Rouge, but definitely Greatest Showman, Zac and Zendaya. So if you like that vibe, you'll probably like this one. All right, well, that was all of the magical competition books that I have to share with you guys today. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Let me know if you've read any of these books and if you liked them or didn't like them. It's okay, we can still be friends. And let me know if you plan on picking any of them up on my recommendation, and then drop your recommendations below for any like magical competition books that you think that I should read, because I am always on the lookout for new ones. All right, well, thank you guys for hanging out with me. My name is Jessie, and I will see you next time. Bye.